So, what is venting and why should I really care about that? And what does it have to do with me playing well and all the things that go into playing a musical instrument, in this case, our wind instruments? Well, venting basically is on a woodwind instrument like a flute, clarinet, saxophone, bassoon. It refers to how high the pads or the pad cups go above the body of the instruments when they're open. And so if you look at a flute, for example, you see all these keys, and they have what they call pad cups. And in the pad cups are little pads. In this case, it's a yellow pad. And that sits above the body of the instrument. And so when you press it down, it covers the hole. And when you release it, it sits above it. Well, venting has to do with how high that key and that pad actually sits above the instrument when it's open. Well, why should you really care about that? Well, there are really four things that have a direct impact on your playing when it comes to venting. One is depending on how high or low the actual pad cup sits above the flute, it can affect the quality of the sound. Number two, it can have a definite effect on how the instrument responds when you try to blow air through it. And if they're real close to the hole, it can be, the response will not be really as good as it should be. It will definitely affect tuning. And this is kind of a little more advanced, but it's pretty easy to understand. The instrument and the instrument makers, the manufacturers, they have specs that they give the technicians when they work on the instruments. And the specs have to do with how high these keys should be above the body of the instruments. And that's really for optimal performance. And so when they're where they should be, it lines up with where the tuning should be on that particular note on the instrument. So if you close it, it can make it stuffy, and if it gets low enough, it actually can cause the pitch to go flat. And you don't want that. And the opposite is true. If the pad comes up too high, it will go the other direction. It tend to be sharp. So that's really important, especially if you're playing in a small group where you really can be heard and you're playing with a piano or guitar, whatever it is, you want to be in tune. And the other thing, and I'm not saying it's the final thing, but definitely this is huge when it comes to like a clarinet, oboe, flute, even bassoon, is how high the keys are above the instrument have an effect on how the mechanism, the keys respond. And if they're too high, and you get into extremely technical pieces of music, you can have a real problem with coordination, and it'll be very, very frustrating. And if it's too low, the keys are too low, like here on this flute, you'll notice that this pad right here is real close in comparison to the others. But if it's too close, it just doesn't feel right. And a good player will just sense that something is not right. So why should you be concerned about the venting? Because it affects the quality of your sound. It affects how your horn will respond when you play it. It affects your tuning. And it actually will affect how the keys interact with each other and the feel of the instrument. Now, there's one thing that I see very often at the shop is I'll get an instrument in, and I look at it, and, I check the venting and all that, and many times I'll notice that the pads are real, real close to the body of the instrument. And I notice that when the pads were put in the instrument, whoever put them in there, they used a pad that was too thick. And when that happens, it, in essence, will just bring the height the pad and the pad cup way too low because it's thick. It's like having an oversized tire on your car, and it just doesn't work. So it really matters when it comes to repairs, and especially if you're having your instrument repadded or overhauled, that whoever's doing it use the correct pad that's in there. And many times I'll get a phone call from somebody saying, oh, I bought all these pads for this instrument and I put it in and nothing works, and they'll bring it over, I'll take a look at it. And sure enough, they got the right size as far as diameter, but the thickness was wrong. And so it's a problem. So word to the wise, you might want to take an instrument into a tech who can put the right type of pads in there for the instrument that you have.